Since childhood, Jinho had always been lucky. As far back as he could remember, fortune had always seemed to follow him. Whenever he did something, he always won. Although he was blessed with good luck, he had never really tried to understand or define that luck. Instead, he simply accepted it as a natural part of his life, just as everyone else accepted their own circumstances. Just like that, he grew up. Years later, Jinho sat in front of a computer late at night, wearing a headset while playing an online game. A teammate impatiently urged him to hurry up. Another player dismissed the current treasure chest as worthless junk loot and asked whether anyone seriously believed an S-rank weapon would appear from it. Ignoring the complaints, Jinho kept his hand on the mouse and calmly asked his teammates to give him just one more second. As his teammates continued teasing him, one of them joked that the best Jinho could hope for was pulling some worthless trash item. Another teammate laughed and promised that if Jinho actually obtained something valuable, he would personally give him 1 million gold. Hearing that, Jinho immediately became interested. He warned them not to take back their words later if he succeeded. As he stared at the chest, he reflected on the strange luck that had followed him throughout his life. If he had to describe it somehow, simply calling it good luck never felt quite right. The feeling was difficult to explain. Whenever something fortunate was about to happen, he would sense it beforehand. It was as though his luck itself began to tingle. A strange shiver would run through his body, warning him that an opportunity was approaching. As Jinho rested his hand on the mouse, that familiar sensation suddenly returned. The tingling spread through him, growing stronger with every passing second. The moment the shiver reached its peak, he became certain, if he clicked now, something extraordinary would happen. Without hesitation, Jinho pressed the mouse button. The treasure chest burst open in a dazzling explosion of golden light. An ornate weapon emerged from within, radiating an overwhelming aura. The instant it appeared, Jinho leaped from his chair and shouted in excitement. His teammates were equally stunned. They could hardly believe what they were seeing. One after another, they yelled in disbelief, asking whether the item had actually dropped. The odds of obtaining such a weapon were absurdly low, making the result seem impossible. Meanwhile, Jinho simply grinned at their reactions. With complete confidence, he reminded them that he had warned them beforehand. If Li Jongjin said something was going to happen, then it was going to happen. The voice chat instantly fell silent as everyone struggled to process what they had just witnessed. Jinho leaned back in his chair and let out a satisfied sigh. Pulling a rare item was exciting, but in the end it did not really change anything. The strange luck he possessed was completely useless in the real world. At best, it was a trivial ability that only worked inside games. As he stared at the glowing monitor in the darkness of his room, he couldn't help reflecting on his life. Before he knew it, 2 entire years had passed. 2 years spent shut inside his room, doing little more than playing games day after day. During that time, he had submitted application after application, only to face rejection after rejection. One day, a message from his 52nd job interview arrived. The company informed him that based on the results of their evaluation, he was not a suitable candidate and would not be moving on in the hiring process. Trying to protect his pride, Jinho scoffed and convinced himself that the recruiters were fools who simply could not recognize his talent. He swore that one day they would regret passing him over. However, the rejections continued. At first he tried to laugh it off, telling himself he had come close and had only been eliminated during the second round of interviews. But as more rejection messages piled up, his optimism gradually faded. One rejection became dozens. Dozens became 100. After failing 100 job applications, Jinho's confidence was shattered. The repeated failures wore him down bit by bit until the determination he once had nearly disappeared. Unable to face reality, he sought refuge elsewhere. Little by little, he withdrew from the outside world and immersed himself deeper and deeper into gaming, using virtual worlds as an escape from the frustrations of his everyday life. Jinho stared blankly and reflected on the miserable state of his real life. Compared to the excitement and success he experienced in games, reality felt pathetic and hopeless. His gaze eventually drifted toward a note his parents had left behind. Attached to it was some money, along with a message reminding him not to skip meals and to heat up dinner while they were out. Seeing the note only made him feel worse. The fact that he was still relying on his parents despite being an adult filled him with shame. At that moment, Jinho decided that enough was enough. He declared that today would be his final day in the game. It was time to leave this place behind and return to reality. The announcement immediately shocked his in-game companions. They could hardly believe what they were hearing. They asked why he was suddenly quitting when everything had been going so well. Another wondered if they had done something wrong or somehow offended him. Jinho quickly reassured them that it was not their fault. The truth, he explained, had nothing to do with them. After hearing his explanation, the others gradually understood. They realized that his struggles with job hunting were the real reason behind his decision. One of them commented that it must have been difficult carrying the burden of repeated failures while trying to distract himself through games. The group sympathized with him. They admitted that the situation sounded rough and joked that if he really left, there would be no one around to maintain the relaxed atmosphere everyone enjoyed so much. As Jinho prepared to leave the game behind, a voice suddenly called out to him. Realizing it was the boss speaking, he immediately turned his attention toward the unexpected conversation. The boss began by asking which university Jinho had graduated from. Jinho answered that he had graduated from Jinsun University. Curious, the boss continued questioning him, asking about his major. Jinho explained that he had studied business administration. After hearing that, the boss nodded thoughtfully and remarked that someone with a business degree should at least know how to work with numbers. Satisfied with the answer, the boss smiled and delivered a shocking statement. According to him, Jinho no longer needed to waste time searching for a job. Instead, he should simply come work for his company. The unexpected offer left Jinho completely stunned. He stared blankly, unable to process what he had just heard. The boss continued speaking, explaining that he was not asking for anything difficult. Jinho only needed to keep doing exactly what he had already been doing inside the game. Jinho panicked and hurriedly tried to stop them, completely overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. Still unable to believe what he was hearing, he could only stare in disbelief. The scene then shifted toward a massive modern office building. Jung Jinho was 27 years old. His resume was painfully ordinary. He had graduated from Jinsun University with a degree in business administration, possessed only a few basic certifications, and had no meaningful work experience to speak of. Under normal circumstances, someone with a background like his would have struggled to stand out among countless applicants. Yet despite his unimpressive qualifications, an unusual order arrived from the highest level of the company. The instruction was simple and direct. Place Jung Jinho in the trading department. When the department head received the directive, he was visibly surprised. The order had come directly from the president's office, bypassing the usual hiring procedures entirely. The man, Park Hong-seo, head of trading at Kwanghun Securities, could hardly believe it. In all his years at the company, he had never seen such a blunt command handed down from the very top. Since the president had personally inserted Jinho into the company, there was only one conclusion to draw. Jung Jinho was a textbook example of a parachute hire, and the president had personally recommended hiring him. However, Park Hong-seo still didn't understand why the president had hired him. The stock market officially opened at 9 o'clock in the morning. However, because of the call auction system, the real action began much earlier, at 8:30 a.m. Likewise, although the market closed at 3:30 p.m., the final closing price was not determined until 3:40 p.m. through the closing call auction. In total, the trading floor remained in a state of intense activity for 7 hours and 10 minutes each day. For a little over 7 hours, this place transformed into a battlefield unlike any other. Rows of traders sat before countless monitors, watching prices rise and fall in an endless struggle. Capital surged across the market like bullets flying through the air. Yet there was no gunfire, only numbers, charts, and fortunes changing hands every second. And into this battlefield, they had just dropped a so-called parachute hire directly into the heart of the war zone. Jung Jinho stood nervously before the trading team and introduced himself. He politely greeted everyone, saying that it was nice to meet them and that his name was Jung Jinho. Park Hong-seo immediately began asking him a few questions. He wanted to know whether this was Jinho's first time working in finance. Jinho honestly admitted that it was. Park then asked if he had ever participated in mock investing or had any investment experience at all. Once again, Jinho shook his head and admitted that he had none. However, he quickly added that if someone was willing to teach him, he would work hard and learn as much as possible. Hearing those answers, Park Hong-seo's expression remained calm, but inwardly, he was far less pleased. In his mind, he complained that the company had brought in a complete rookie who knew absolutely nothing about trading or investing. Training someone from scratch would take a tremendous amount of time and effort. Junior traders already contributed very little in the beginning, and now it felt as though the higher-ups were simply dumping additional work onto his team. To him, the order from above essentially meant, raise him slowly in your spare time. A moment later, Park called out for assistant manager Lee Hae-rin. Lee Hae-rin immediately responded and approached him. Park informed her that the new hire Jung Jin-ho would be joining the team as a junior trader. He then assigned Jin-ho to her supervision and instructed her to show him the ropes and teach him everything he needed to know. Lee Hae-rin accepted the responsibility without hesitation and cheerfully replied that she understood. With that settled, she led Jung Jin-ho toward the office area where he would be working. As they walked through the trading floor, surrounded by rows of monitors and busy employees, Jin-ho could hardly believe what was happening. Even now, it felt unreal to him. After countless struggles and rejections, he had actually managed to get hired at a prestigious place like this. As Jung Jin-ho followed assistant manager Lee Hae-rin through the office, he still found it difficult to believe his situation. The goofy middle-aged man he had casually played games with online had turned out to be the CEO of Kwanghoon Securities, one of Korea's top 10 securities firms. The realization still felt surreal. Their orientation began in the break room. Hae-rin pressed the coffee machine and started preparing drinks while explaining that everything in the trading department began with coffee. According to her, traders practically ran on caffeine and the coffee had to be prepared properly before the morning meeting. She then gave Jin-ho an important reminder. Team leader Park did not drink coffee, so there was no need to prepare one for him. She explained that Park was the ultimate example of self-discipline, a man who left no gaps in either his health management or his work performance. Jin-ho nodded and carefully listened while mentally taking notes. As they continued talking, Hae-rin explained that the traders in the department carried an extremely heavy workload. Every second mattered in the market, and trades could be decided in an instant. Because of that, junior traders needed to gather whatever information their seniors requested as quickly as possible. Speed and accuracy were essential. Trying to help him understand the environment, Hae-rin compared the stock market to a gigantic casino where trillions of won flowed back and forth every single day. The pressure was so intense that many people eventually lost their sanity working there. Jin-ho could only stare blankly, unsure whether she was joking or being completely serious. Seeing his reaction, Hae-rin looked directly at him and asked whether he truly thought he could handle such an environment. Before he could answer, she added that being a trader was not a profession suited for ordinary people. The job demanded an abnormal level of focus, endurance, and mental strength. Hearing those words, Jin-ho broke into a nervous sweat. For the first time since arriving, he began to realize just how brutal the world of professional trading could be. Assistant manager Lee Hae-rin suddenly burst into laughter and admitted that she had only been teasing him. Contrary to her earlier warnings, she claimed that the job was actually great. Seeing Jung Jin-ho's bewildered expression, she casually remarked that, in the end, people were people no matter where one worked. After joking around for a moment, Hae-rin's expression softened. Since they would be working together from now on, she suggested that they make a promise. No matter how difficult things became, neither of them would run away from the other. She delivered the declaration with an enthusiastic smile and a playful finger point, making it sound more like a friendly oath than a workplace agreement. Jin-ho stared at her for a moment before concluding that she was a rather unique person. Still, her cheerful attitude eased some of his anxiety. If someone like Hae-rin was going to be his senior, perhaps he could really survive in this unfamiliar industry after all. Feeling encouraged, Jin-ho's confidence gradually returned. Soon afterward, the team's morning meeting began. As the presentation screen lit up, the discussion immediately shifted to market conditions. One of the traders pointed out that the latest U.S. non-farm payroll (NFP) figures had significantly exceeded expectations. With the upcoming Consumer Price Index (CPI) release approaching, they anticipated a sharp increase in market volatility. The trader then turned the conversation toward the foreign exchange market and asked for an update on how FX conditions were developing. As the meeting continued, the discussion shifted toward the broader market outlook. One analyst reported that the US dollar index remained firmly above 105, indicating continued dollar strength. When the team leader asked about foreign investor activity, another trader explained that overseas capital was currently flowing heavily into the defense and automotive sectors. However, he cautioned that the buying pressure was beginning to make parts of the market look overbought. Using Kangsam Electronics as an example, he pointed out that the company's price-to-earnings ratio had already climbed above 12 times earnings. Because of this elevated valuation, he warned that short-term pressure could soon emerge as investors reassessed prices. If foreign buying continued at its current pace, traders positioned on the opposite side of the market would begin suffering losses. To prepare for that possibility, he instructed everyone to strengthen their risk management practices. He proposed taking short positions while simultaneously establishing hedges through exchange-traded funds and futures contracts. The team promptly acknowledged the directive and began preparing accordingly. Meanwhile, sitting quietly in the back, Jung Jinho felt completely overwhelmed. As he filled his notebook with meaningless scribbles, he realized that he had not understood a single word of the discussion. The barrage of financial terminology sounded like an entirely different language to him. He could not help wondering whether he truly belonged there. Later, during a break, Jinho received a phone call. Instinctively, he started to address the caller as Mr. President before awkwardly correcting himself. On the other end of the line, the guildmaster laughed and admitted that hearing such a formal title from Jinho felt strange. He joked that it almost tickled his ears and remarked that Jinho was probably scheming something if he suddenly became so respectful. The guildmaster then asked how Jinho's first day had gone. Jinho hesitated before confessing his worries. He felt as though he was simply getting in everyone's way and questioned whether it was really acceptable for him to be working there. The guildmaster immediately dismissed those concerns. He pointed out that if a single rookie could destroy an entire company, the business should have gone bankrupt long ago. He reminded Jinho that his judgment of people had never been wrong. More importantly, Jinho had spent years working tirelessly for the guild. He was always diligent, always polite, and always willing to help others. Continuing, the guildmaster explained that Jinho had handled the raid members better than he ever could. He had wanted to repay that kindness somehow. With a warm chuckle, he added that without Jinho around, the game simply would not have been nearly as fun. However, the guildmaster gave him one final piece of advice. He told Jinho to treat his superiors at the company the same way he had always treated him in the guild. The meaning behind those words was obvious enough, but before Jinho could ask for clarification, the guildmaster suddenly changed the subject and told Jinho that if anyone asked how he had gotten the job, he should simply say that he did not know. Immediately afterward, he announced that he was hanging up. Jinho hurriedly tried to stop him, calling out for him to wait, but it was already too late. The line disconnected before he could ask any further questions. Staring at the phone in silence, he could only let out a weary sigh. A moment later, someone called out for him. Snapping back to reality, Jinho quickly responded and rushed off to rejoin the others. Not long afterward, Manager Lee told him about mock investing. She explained that she had actually won the mock investment competition organized by the company during her college years. According to her, that achievement had significantly strengthened her resume and helped her career. She then asked whether Jinho had participated in many mock investment competitions himself. Caught off guard, Jinho awkwardly admitted that he had never taken part in any. His answer seemed to amuse her. Smiling, she remarked that he must be the rare type who preferred jumping straight into the real thing rather than practicing through simulations. Without missing a beat, she suddenly launched into an explanation about the purpose of mock investing and enthusiastically declared that it was an excellent question. Jinho blinked in confusion. The problem was that he had not actually asked anything at all. Meanwhile, Manager Lee continued her explanation, telling Jinho that a company could not simply hand real money to a junior trader who had not yet proven himself. Because of that, newcomers were first given virtual funds and allowed to trade in a real market environment so their abilities could be evaluated without risking actual capital. She further explained that junior traders were assigned various tasks to build experience until they reached the level of a senior trader. Among those evaluations, mock investing served as one of the most important measures of performance. After listening carefully, Jinho finally asked whether strong results in mock investing could lead to a promotion to senior trader. Manager Lee nodded immediately and confirmed that it was possible. According to her, it did not matter how long someone had worked at the company or how prestigious their degree was. In the end, performance was everything. The person who made the most money would rise to the top. Hearing that, Jinho paused for a moment. The answer was surprisingly straightforward. In his mind he repeated the phrase, "the one who makes the most money," and concluded that the system was much simpler than he had expected. Not long afterward, that time had come. When the Seoul stock market officially opened, the atmosphere inside the office transformed almost instantly. Only moments earlier, the trading floor had been calm and quiet. Now employees rushed between desks, phones rang non-stop, keyboards clattered, and market data flooded across countless monitors. The peaceful office had become a battlefield in the blink of an eye. Traders focused intensely on their screens while analysts exchanged information at a frantic pace. Watching the sudden surge of activity, Jinho realized that everything had changed the moment the market opened. As Jinho watched the chaos of the trading floor unfold before him, he silently reflected that this must be what the atmosphere inside a securities firm was truly like. However, almost immediately something felt off. His eyes widened slightly, and confusion surfaced in his mind. He could not understand what was happening. A strange sensation suddenly spread through his body, causing him to freeze in place. Looking down at his hand resting on the mouse, Jinho realized that his fingertips seemed to be picking up something. The feeling was faint yet unmistakable, as though an invisible force was flowing through them. The mysterious sensation grew stronger, making him even more bewildered. He wondered what exactly he was feeling. Then a realization struck him. The strange energy coursing through his fingertips felt incredibly familiar. It was the exact same sensation he always experienced in the game moments before obtaining a rare item. As Jinho stared at his hand, Manager Lee pointed toward a stock displaying blue numbers and remarked that the blue figures indicated the stock was approaching its lower limit. At that moment, Jinho's hand remained firmly on the mouse. The strange sensation flowing through his fingertips had not disappeared. Instead, it continued to grow stronger. Noticing his unusual behavior, Manager Lee looked at him with concern and asked what he was doing. Jinho remained silent. Deep down, he knew he possessed a peculiar ability. In reality, it was completely useless, a pathetic little skill that only worked in games. Ordinarily, such an ability had no value outside of gaming. Yet this time was different. As the tingling intensified and a shiver ran through his entire body, Jinho's eyes narrowed. A faint smile appeared on his lips as he stared at the stock on the screen. The sensation was unmistakable. It was the same feeling he experienced whenever an extremely rare reward was about to appear. Trusting his instinct, Jinho made a decision. Without hesitating any longer, he pressed the buy button. The system immediately confirmed the transaction. His buy order had been executed. The moment Jinho clicked the buy button, Manager Lee's eyes widened in shock. She immediately rushed toward him and demanded to know what he was doing. Before he could respond, she stared at the screen and let out a startled cry. Manager Lee quickly explained that he couldn't simply press the buy button without any analysis. Worse, because he had placed a market order, the transaction had been executed instantly at the current market price. Trying to help him understand, Manager Lee pointed at the chart displayed on the monitor and asked him what color the candlesticks were. Jinho glanced at the screen before answering that they were blue. Manager Lee nodded and explained that blue indicated the stock was hitting its lower limit. In other words, the price was still falling. Hearing that, Jinho became nervous and asked whether he should sell immediately. Manager Lee shook her head. According to her, there was still a chance the stock could reverse direction and turn green. If that happened, they could sell and recover at least part of the loss. Jinho awkwardly scratched the back of his head and apologized for acting recklessly. Seeing how worried he looked, Manager Lee tried to reassure him. After all, this was only mock investing. No real money had been lost, so there was no reason to panic. Jinho nodded, but his thoughts remained elsewhere. The strange sensation that had prompted him to buy still lingered in his mind. It had been exactly the same feeling he always experienced in games whenever a rare item was about to appear. Acting on instinct, he had clicked without thinking, yet the stock continued to fall. Watching the chart sink lower and lower, doubt began to creep into his mind. Perhaps his strange ability had nothing to do with stocks after all. Jinho stared at the declining chart with a bitter expression. A sigh escaped his lips as disappointment settled over him. For a brief moment, he had allowed himself to believe that his strange ability might actually work in the stock market. Now, watching the price continue to fall, he could only admit to himself that he had gotten his hopes up for nothing. The impulsive purchase suddenly felt foolish. Beside him, Manager Lee remained silent. She noticed the dejected look on his face but chose not to say anything. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the trading division, countless traders remained glued to their monitors. This department specialized in an aggressive form of investing known as hyper-short-term trading. Unlike traditional investing, the goal was not to hold stocks for long periods. Instead, traders skimmed tiny profits from rapid transactions that lasted anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes. Most people simply referred to it as day trading. The entire office was filled with individuals who had become obsessed with the practice. Every second mattered. Every minute brought new opportunities and new risks. It was an endless tug-of-war between rising and falling prices, between green candles and red candles. In this battlefield, a single moment of hesitation or a single correct decision could determine everything. Traders clicked their mice and typed commands at incredible speed, each attempting to gain an advantage over the market. As the final moments of the trading session arrived, everyone focused intently on their screens, waiting for the day's results. Then, with the closing bell, the session came to an end. The market was now closed. After the market closed, the true outcome of the day's battle became apparent. In the world of trading, the result usually led to one of two emotions: an overwhelming rush of excitement or intense frustration. One trader suddenly sprang from his seat and celebrated enthusiastically after seeing the final numbers. His team had achieved an average return of 1.3%, a result significant enough to draw the attention of everyone nearby. Some employees reacted with envy, while others looked on with admiration. Jung Jin-ho, however, could not understand why everyone seemed so impressed. Turning to Manager Lee, he asked whether a return of only 1.3% was truly considered exceptional. Manager Lee immediately explained that such a result was far more impressive than it appeared. According to her, if a senior trader managed a fund worth 20 billion won and consistently generated returns at that level, the annual profit could reach approximately 3 billion won. A trader capable of producing that kind of performance would be regarded as an A-tier professional within the industry. She then reminded Jin-ho of something she had told him earlier. In a securities firm, status was determined by profit. The individual who generated the most money naturally commanded the greatest respect. At that moment, the celebrating trader heard someone call his name. Looking up, he discovered the team leader standing beside his workstation. After briefly reviewing the day's performance, the team leader expressed his approval of Assistant Lee's results. He praised the excellent work and encouraged him to continue maintaining such high standards. Hearing those words, Assistant Lee immediately rose from his seat and bowed respectfully. He expressed his gratitude for the recognition and thanked the team leader for his guidance throughout the day. However, the team leader's expression soon became more serious. He reminded Assistant Lee that the day's success was only the beginning and that the real work still lay ahead. After the team leader finished giving his instructions, he ordered the staff to compile the day's trading results and profit and loss calculations. There was still work to be done before the day could truly end. He also intended to finalize the strategy for the following trading session before leaving the office. Later, while the team leader was working alone in his office, Manager Lee hesitated outside the door. After noticing her lingering presence, he looked up from his desk and asked whether there was something she wanted to discuss. Manager Lee smiled awkwardly and admitted that there was a matter concerning one of the new employees. Curious, the team leader set aside the drink in his hand and asked for an explanation. After a brief pause, Manager Lee informed him that the new hire had accidentally purchased a full position in a single stock during his first day on the job. To make matters worse, the purchase had been executed using a market order. For a moment, the team leader simply stared at her in silence. Manager Lee quickly explained that she believed the mistake had occurred while she was training the newcomer. According to her, he had likely clicked the wrong button by accident. However, the situation became even more concerning because the stock had fallen all the way to its daily lower limit. As a result, she worried that the incident could negatively affect the new employee's evaluation on his very first day at the company. After Manager Lee finished explaining the situation, the team leader fell silent and carefully considered her words. What surprised him was not the mistake itself, but the fact that Assistant Manager Lee Hae-rin seemed unusually eager to defend the newcomer. They had only known each other for a single day, yet she was already trying to shield him from criticism. After a brief moment of thought, the team leader acknowledged her concerns. He decided not to be overly harsh on the new employee for a mistake made on his first day and instructed Manager Lee not to worry about the matter. Instead, he told her to focus on preparing the briefing materials. Before she left, however, he added that the newcomer still needed a proper lesson. Mistakes like this could not simply be ignored. Manager Lee immediately agreed and promised to train the new employee more thoroughly in the future. After thanking the team leader, she left the office. Once he was alone again, the team leader turned his attention back to the trading records. His gaze settled on the stock the newcomer had purchased, Jungang Insurance. A frown appeared on his face. Of all the stocks available in the market, the newcomer had chosen an insurance company at a time like this. As he reviewed the trade, the team leader reflected on how common mistakes were among inexperienced employees. New hires accidentally placing sell orders happened all the time. That was the entire reason mock investing programs existed in the first place, to allow beginners to make mistakes without risking real capital. The team leader continued reviewing the trade and found himself unable to completely dismiss it. Buying an entire position at market price was not the sort of action someone took without a reason. It suggested intent, not carelessness. After a moment, however, he shook his head and forced the thought aside. It was only a mock investment account filled with virtual money. There was no point wasting time over analyzing a rookie's mistake. In the end, he concluded that it had merely been a random thought, nothing more than an error committed by a parachute hire who had stumbled into the company through connections. Before long, the market closed, and the real chaos of the day began. Tasks flooded in from every direction. Employees rushed through the office carrying documents and reports as an avalanche of work descended upon the team. Requests for analytical data piled up one after another. Strategy meeting materials based on the day's trading performance had to be prepared before the evening briefing. Amid the constant stream of assignments and deadlines, everyone became completely absorbed in their work. Jin-ho was no exception. Swept up in the overwhelming pace of the securities firm, he hurried from task to task until he finally regained his composure and came back to his senses. By the time the workday finally came to an end, they had already spent 14 hours at the office. As the golden glow of sunset poured through the windows, Lee Hai-rin approached Jin-ho with a smile and asked if he was ready to clock out. The two left the building together and stepped into the evening crowd. As they walked, Lee Hai-rin praised Jin-ho for performing surprisingly well on his very first day. Then, with a teasing smile, she mentioned that there had been one small mistake. The reminder immediately made Jin-ho tense up. Forcing a nervous smile, he asked whether it had really been such a minor issue. Trying to reassure himself, he reasoned that no company would seriously penalize a brand new employee over a single mistake made during a mock investment exercise. Lee Hai-rin laughed softly at his reaction. She admitted that team leader Park might not completely agree with that assessment, causing Jin-ho's confidence to waver. Watching him, she couldn't help but wonder whether he was simply overflowing with confidence or completely unaware of how serious the mistake had looked. Before he could dwell on it any longer, she reminded him of the promise they had made earlier. No matter how difficult things became, he wasn't allowed to run away from the job. With a bright smile, she told him that she would see him again tomorrow. Jin-ho immediately bowed deeply in farewell and thanked her, promising to take care on his way home. As Jin-ho walked away from the office, he couldn't help feeling incredibly fortunate. In his mind, he repeatedly thought about how lucky he was to have someone as kind as Lee Hai-rin as his trainer. Compared to the intimidating atmosphere of the company, her patience and encouragement felt like a blessing. Just then, his phone suddenly rang. Recognizing the caller, Jin-ho immediately answered with enthusiasm and respectfully greeted the person on the other end as Sir. The man laughed and quickly corrected him, telling him not to call him Sir when they were alone. Instead, he should simply call him Hyung. After a brief exchange of greetings, the man asked whether the job had turned out to be even tougher than Jin-ho had expected. He jokingly wondered if Jin-ho had already started complaining to his trainer. Jin-ho immediately denied it. He insisted that he wouldn't dare complain and declared that he was giving the job everything he had. The man found his response amusing and asked what exactly had impressed him so much. Jin-ho answered honestly. Watching everyone at the company work had left him genuinely awestruck. The workload alone was overwhelming. Everywhere he looked, employees were buried under endless responsibilities. Technical terms flew through the air so quickly that he could barely understand a single one of them. On top of that, there was a suffocating tension that seemed to permeate the entire office whenever the market was open. Everything he had experienced that day led him to an unavoidable realization. While he had spent so much of his life standing still, everyone around him had been grinding relentlessly day after day. The dedication and effort he had witnessed made him reflect on himself. Because of that, he admitted honestly that he still wasn't sure whether he truly belonged in that world. Hearing his doubts, the man on the other end of the phone laughed. He told Jin-ho to stop worrying about such things and assured him that everything would work out. He explained that although he might not know much about finance, his ability to judge people was genuine. If he believed in someone, there was usually a good reason for it. The conversation then took a sudden turn. The man casually asked when Jin-ho planned to log into the game, mentioning that he was already waiting online for him. Jin-ho was stunned. He had literally just left the office moments ago. The man immediately began complaining in a joking tone. After all, he had gone through the trouble of helping Jin-ho get a job, and now the guy was already trying to skip game night. Panicking, Jin-ho quickly promised that he would log in right away. Once the call ended, a horrifying realization struck him. Apparently, clocking out from work did not actually mean the day was over. With that thought weighing heavily on his mind, Jin-ho hurried down the street, rushing home as fast as he could. The next morning, the office came alive the moment the lights flickered on. Employees immediately settled into their workstations and began preparing for another busy day. A few moments later, a manager addressed the team, praising everyone for their efforts and informing them that a meeting would begin in 15 minutes. He instructed everyone to be ready. The staff promptly acknowledged the order. As preparations continued, the manager asked whether there was anything noteworthy to report. One employee explained that several stocks had experienced significant volatility during the trading session. He added that all the relevant data had already been organized and sent by email. The manager thanked him and stated that he would review the information personally. While examining the report, his attention was drawn to a particular detail. Following the recent interest rate hike, most insurance stocks had suffered severe losses. As the manager reviewed the market data that had been sent to him, he casually opened one of the charts. However, the moment he saw it, his expression changed. Something wasn't right. Leaning closer to the monitor, he quickly navigated through several windows to verify what he was seeing. The stock continued climbing. His eyes widened. This was the very insurance stock that Jung Jin-ho had purchased the previous day. That alone would not have been unusual, except for the fact that the entire insurance sector had been suffering after the recent interest rate hike. Most related stocks had taken severe losses, yet this one was surging, with a growth rate of 15%. Seeing this, Manager Lee hurried over to Jin-ho's desk and demanded to know how he had managed to identify such an opportunity. Jin-ho, who had been equally surprised by the reaction, attempted to calm everyone down. Before he could offer any explanation, however, a deep voice cut through the commotion. The department manager had arrived. Walking directly toward Jung Jin-ho, the manager stopped in front of his desk and called his name. Then, with a serious expression, he instructed him to follow him to the office.